Abortion is the leading cause of death in America, and the drugs account for 63% of those abortions. So, I mean, that's not making America healthy again. MAGA or MAHA or whatever, adding a new life-ending drug to the market doesn't make us greater, and it doesn't make us healthier.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon sense in current times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. Today I am with Sue Liebel, who is the Director of State Affairs for the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. And we're here to talk about the abortion pill. What's interesting about this is, Secretary Kennedy Jr., Kennedy Jr. said that, that we would not, there would be a much thorough review on this abortion pill, that it'd be very dangerous. And then back in the end of September, I think it was September 30th, the FDA just passed it. There wasn't a whole lot of news about it. Oddly, I didn't even hear about it until much later, of what was going on. And so it just seems to just kind of have come out of nowhere on this. So, Sue, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I appreciate you being here. Did you feel betrayed? Maybe that's probably the first question. And if so, can you kind of like talk about like why you felt betrayed and why this is a problem?
Absolutely. So, but thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It's a problem that a lot of people don't know about, but when you hear about it, it will probably make sense. We really were scratching our head, and we were very disappointed. In RFK even said in front of a Senate committee a few weeks before that Biden's FDA twisted the data in order to bury one of the safety protocols. And so there seemed to be a recognition that something's not right here, and they pledged to look into it. And I think that'll take a while. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but we want very much for them to look at the science. You know, those pills were approved by the FDA in the year 2000. Under Clinton. In fact, they were rushed to market and they jumped over a few steps that they're supposed to do. But today is 25 years later, and there's a lot more science, a lot more studies, a lot more experience with these pharmaceuticals than we had in the year 2000. And so it's going south. It's not working well. Women are being harmed. And so they promised to do that. And 2 weeks later, they approved a generic version of it. It
So,
doesn't make much sense.
do you think and I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but every now and then I have part of it comes out of me. Do you think part of it is they push us through because of what he said? Because they're like, okay, we know that if more studies come out on this, that we're going to see the danger behind it, and so we're going to just push it through as fast as we can to get it done quickly, and then play catch up on the back end of it? Or do you think that this was kind of the plan the whole time, and RFK didn't know about it or was complicit in it?
You know, I honestly can't say. I don't know. I do know that in any kind of drug, the process of going from the original drug like to a generic, allowing a generic, drug companies have to apply for that. It has to be, I mean, it takes a long time to get that generic approval. And there are prescribed, I mean, I would call it bureaucracy, but there are prescribed steps to that. And if the FDA didn't do it in the right way, the company could sue them. They could get sued for not doing it. That's the nice version. I mean, that's the bureaucracy, boring answer, is that it was in the process and was due to be approved finally. And although it didn't get rushed to approval under the genericness under Biden either. So I'm not really sure I don't think we know exactly what happened, but, it's just mystifying too because a week after telling pregnant women, not to take Tylenol, they approve a generic version of the abortion drug that kills their babies. So it really
I
is,
didn't connect that.
at first I thought maybe the left hand just didn't know what the right hand was doing. It's a large bureaucracy. But whatever it is, the harmful impact of the Biden era FDA removing the safeguards, the safety protocols on these abortion drugs, like having to get them in person by visiting a doctor who can rule out pre-existing conditions and things like that. Um, there's just a growing body of research that indicates they're far more dangerous than advertised and certainly what we first thought in the year 2000. There's even more and more stories of women being coerced or given these drugs against their will. The ex-boyfriend spiking her drink with the drugs, that putting her in the emergency room. The emergency room visits are just striking, and some women have died. And so, that no matter what's happening, they've got to get back on this. They've got, at a minimum, they should hold the drugs while they're studying it, or pull them from the market altogether while that new research, that new study goes on.
I've heard of, and I've had people on the show talking about it as well, of it helping with sex trafficking. That it was and that's where and that's honestly when you started talking about it, that's where I thought you were going to be heading. I have not heard of the situations where boyfriends slipping into their girlfriend's drinks, something of that nature. Um, is there any criminal action against people that are forcing that? And if so, and then how do you prove it? How do you know it's not just a normal miscarriage? If somebody had slipped it into, if someone slipped it into their girlfriend's drink, how would they know it was just this and not just a normal miscarriage?
Well, actually, we have several cases. Um, uh, One in Houston where he tried 6 times. Her husband tried 6 times, and she found the package, you know, and and he actually went to jail. Um, in a couple of other cases, the mother got them and made the daughter take them, kind of thing, so she was able to say that she made me do it. And so there are situations where women have found out that they know. Yeah. And it's happening more and more. Also, we already know from newer research that 11% at least are going to suffer some sort of adverse side effects. And often that turns into sepsis. So they end up in the emergency rooms. And so
Wow.
states are starting to require emergency rooms to document when they know how often this happens. Just kind of like they document motorcycle accidents or other
Right.
sorts of public health things. And other studies have shown that 75% of those visits are miscoded by the ER. Women are told when they buy them online to, if you do have to go to the ER, tell them you're having a miscarriage. So the whoever's selling these pills to them are even telling them to lie to their doctors. This is really unfortunate because the doctor needs to know the best way to treat her,
Right.
um, and needs to know things like that, but they're being told to lie. So we know we have a miscoding problem. Um, we actually they're when it's been reviewed, they're twice as likely to be coded severe or critical when the docs are paying attention, and coding it properly. So we know we've got a real problem here, um, whether it's coercion or sex trafficking, like you said, how easy, a man can go online and buy those. A sex trafficker. I have heard tell of when I've been in Texas that they've caught them coming across the border in duffel bags into the small towns on the southern border.
Wow.
So we've got, it's nefarious activity, um, uh, as
Uh,
we would expect.
I've asked this question among everybody who has been on here who fights the good fight for abortion, but a question I have is this: is that there is, to me, I feel like as especially as Christians, that we are fighting downstream when we fight abortion. That we would not have these issues with the abortion pills or states' rights with abortion or any of this stuff if we started fighting more upstream with the idea of the biblical concept of purity and of that nature. Do you think that this seems to be, especially coming from the men buying it and slipping into the drinks that side, it seems to be that again is where we're failing, is on that area. So even if the woman is wanting to have the child, it doesn't seem like that is happening on the other end, but it seems like that's where we as Christians seem to be failing. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think there are a number of ways in our society today where we're failing, as a fellow Christian myself. Um, and and also we know from research that women say, a majority of women say, if one person had said to me, "I will help you. I will walk with you. I will help you with whatever you need or get you what you need, but I'll be with you. I won't just give you a handout. I'll walk this thing with you." Especially if he would say that, right? But that's why our pregnancy centers are so doing such an amazing job, not only getting her what she needs, but actually walking with her through the whole thing up to 2 years. And so women say if one person had offered to come along with me on this journey, and it may end in adoption or something else, but unfortunately, we're not wrapping our arms around her either. Um, and we need to do more in that space, providing support. That's one reason why, even before Roe versus Wade went down, Susan B. Anthony started a program called Her Plan. Her Plan is actually an app on your phone. It's GIS based. So we're in, I think, 21 states now. We're loading services onto this app that are pro life. So if she walks into a shelter and she's pregnant tonight, they don't take her to Planned Parenthood tomorrow. So we're finding the pro-life services, and whatever town she's in, she's looking for help, and it sees her GIS location, and we're building out a pro-life network of services all around the country and trying to identify them, so we can be more supportive and helpful. And states are doing the same thing. A lot of states have curtailed or limited abortion, since the Dobbs decision. But those same states have also expanded this network of services and help in their states as best they can. So we need to be serving and caring. And I agree with you on the purity thing too. Something else I have always thought of, and I guess this isn't a thing, but if I had, my knee replacement, for example, and the doctor just did a bad job, I would say to my friend, "Oh, don't go there. Don't do that. Don't go to this
yeah.
doctor or that was a bad thing." You would think the girls would tell each other, "Oh man, don't take those pills." They lie to them and they tell them it'll be easy, it'll just be a little cramping, kind of like a heavy period or something. It turns out they're on their bathroom floors in a fetal position in so much pain, and they're bleeding out so badly, and they think they're dying, and that's when they're gonna go to the emergency room too. It's just a horrible situation. I would think, I would tell my girlfriends, don't do that," but, that doesn't
So
seem to be happening.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's I understand like in the 70s and 80s, and there was still a stigma approached with even with premarital sex, especially among the woman. And as she got pregnant, young, there was a stigma attached to the whole family. But nowadays, sex is promoted so much and encouraged even among family members, etc. Why do you think that they're pushing it from the boyfriend or the mom or something else like this? Is it financial? Because it's no longer I don't think it's any more social anymore, but maybe I'm wrong. Why do you think that they're
I think
pushing
there no,
this
I think
ease?
there's just a variety of reasons. Um, there's there are a lot of reasons, and it's really, the convenience of the person pushing it more than from what we're understanding from our research than the woman who's she's afraid, she's scared, she's in a tizzy, she's not making good decisions right now. And then she's got family members or a husband who doesn't want an extra child. I think that the list goes on, of their reasons. And actually, you mentioned the 70s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. Today, abortion is the leading cause of death in America. Um, it and the drugs account for 63% of those abortions. Um, and so, I mean, that's not making America healthy again. Ma MAGA or MAHA or whatever, adding a new life-ending drug to the market doesn't make us greater, and it doesn't make us healthier.
What With that being said, I mean, the FDA, in your opinion, like, why does the FDA even have, like, any type of I mean, I know they have authority that's government mandated, but they don't have any credibility. I mean, between the approval of Oxy, between the approval of Xanax for the way it's being used now, not the way it was actually intended, for the way they passed the vaccine, for the way they kinda push through certain drugs, but hold others up. I've not heard of anything that allowed the FDA to have any type of credible authority in years. Why do you think they're still being able to maintain credible authority among both pharmacies and or pharmaceuticals companies, as well as with Congress?
Well, this isn't necessarily my expertise, the business end of the FDA. But I do know on the abortion issue, the medical community has become pro-choice, pro-abortion. They I mean, almost rabidly so. And, that's especially true for when a woman gets a prenatal diagnosis, there's a disability or something like that, but something's with the baby. But, the medical community in general, not all, but in general, has, forgotten its oath to do no harm and are pushing abortion. ACOG, the American Academy of OBGYNs, is just radicalized on abortion. And so that influences the FDA too on the pharmaceuticals they want. And also, now you have to remember this was approved under Clinton. Then Obama lessened during the Obama years, they lessened some of those restrictions. And then the Biden White House, the FDA, really um, removed the in-person requirement, which has allowed the mailing of the drugs. And so, that was done to help their friends in the abortion industry sell more drugs. I mean, be able to mail them instead of having bricks and mortar, having a clinic, or having to keep the lights on, they can just mail the you can mark up the pills with a tremendous markup and then mail them, and it's much easier and cheaper. So I really think there were some financial incentives and some push from the industry.
Do you think that's the reason why it's not being coded correctly a lot of times in the ER is because they recognize that if they start coding it correctly, it may go against their philosophical beliefs on abortion?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons for it, and that may be one. Another, I know I've heard of this, I've done this a long time. Some hospitals don't want any sort of paperwork where it says abortion on the page, lest they be accused of doing the abortion. Now, in this case, they're fixing her, they're helping her afterwards. And I mean, they need to do that, but they don't want that to get twisted from a PR perspective. Also, I happen to have a theory too. Do you ever notice when you go to the doctor, there's a when it's all done, there's a sheet of paper that they fill out, and there's a code.
Mhm.
They code that code goes to insurance. So a broken leg is ICD 104967 or whatever. They check that box, and that's how that whole coding system happens. I think it's also they're busy in the ER, and it's easier to remember one code than the 6 or 8 or 12 that are more finer diagnoses. And think of it as a Dewey Decimal System of medical coding, and you'd have to go look it up or memorize too many codes. So I think there's a variety of reasons. I also think they just think, "Hey, I just wanna treat this, leave me out of it," you know? But from a and which is I mean, thank goodness they're there to women are on these drugs, if they fail more often than a surgical abortion. And by fail, I mean all of the baby doesn't come out. Well, if it's retained, that gets infected and she can go septic very quickly. And so time is of the essence too. And I wish I could tell young ladies this and I don't know, could you have told me that when I was their age, I don't know, but, because when people are desperate, they do desperate things. But there's just, so much, danger, in the drugs that we have that doesn't get out there, and unfortunately, the FDA isn't making that known either.
So, since the Dobbs decision moved everything to the states, and when you look at the history of abortion, I mean, pro-lifers are having to shift nonstop on like what's the strategy going to be. Like, it's not as a simple approach; it's always going back and forth. But it seems like with the FDA weakening this, and then making it harder even for the states that are very strong anti-abortion states, it makes it very difficult. What can states do now, especially with mailing? Is there anything that I'm in Tennessee. Tennessee is a very strong it's a very
Mhm,
strong red state. What
mhm.
can we do to help stop this shipment of abortion pills, or anything of that nature? What can we do about that?
That is a very astute, question because even President Trump, is back to the states, is back to the states. Well, there were, I don't know, 18 or 19 attorneys general that wrote a letter to the FDA and said, "Yeah, it's back to the States, but you're allowing this mail order stuff, and we can't control that. We've done all we can do, like in Tennessee. We've gone as kind of as far as we can. We've limited abortion, greatly. But the FDA is just allowing them to be poured into our states. Please help us." And that's why we get back to the FDA's role and obviously RFK and the folks who are in charge there. States can also do um, and I this is something I do in my day job is work with states to to require even still, even though the pills are coming in the mail for now, we still can shore up state laws. States can regulate medicine in their states. And so states can still require an in-person visit. They can still require that she receives the first drug, and it's a two drug regimen in person, a doctor, not a secretary or a nurse or a different type of medical provider, but a doctor, that requiring an ultrasound to make sure that that is not an ectopic pregnancy. And because if it is, she's 36% more likely to die if she takes those pills. So she needs testing to rule that out. Um, States can require that sort of thing. States can also enhance their enforcement. Now, it's not very easy to catch the mail order, whoever mailed it, especially if it's in a brown paper bag with no markings on it. But
Right.
they can really expand their enforcement if they do catch somebody, and that's what's happening. Louisiana and Texas now have a lawsuit against a doctor in New York who's they've caught mailing those pills in. And we hope very much that um, will trigger a look into the. I mean, and that will trigger a discussion of the interstate commerce clause, so that because New York has a shield law. So some of these other states, not Tennessee, but New York, California, Illinois, the blue states that are pro-abortion, they have passed laws that if they are caught, anybody in their state caught, they will protect them. They will not extradite them. They will not allow them to be charged. They will not assist in any of that consequence if they are caught mailing the drugs to a a state that doesn't allow abortion. So those are called shield laws, and that's another level of unfortunate protection that the pro-choice states have done, trying to work on that. That you know, states have always, if a murderer comes to from Tennessee comes to my state will extradite them back to Tennessee, right?
Right.
We do that all the time with things like that. But except with abortion drugs, those states have passed laws that they will shield the New York doctor.
But
So
but but civilly, could they do
evil
it
never takes a
civilly?
yeah. Huh?
Well, could they do it civilly? I mean, could a situation be
Yes.
where we
Yes.
sue them civilly? Because eventually, after a while, a doctor is gonna be like, "Okay, it's not worth it to me, and my
Yes.
malpractice insurance is going up," or they canceled me because I continue to violate this law.
Right.
Is that a
Actually,
possibility?
oh, yes, a lot of states have a lot of states have civil ability to do civil liability. In fact, Texas just this session, just 2 months ago, in the special session, Texas enhanced its civil liability laws such that, say, her mother or her husband who wanted the baby, maybe anybody in her immediate family that can find who mailed them, who distributed
Right.
them, who prescribed them, can sue them civilly. They just expand that a little bit. So that is absolutely another road. Louisiana has put the drugs on the list of scheduled drugs. You've got
Mm,
heroin and
yeah.
opioid and things like that, and then on those lists, you've got a lower level for dangerous pharmaceuticals, and they just added this drug, Mifepristone, to that level. And really what that does is if anybody's caught trafficking any of these drugs on the schedule, on the list, then those have additional penalties. So they've added it to that list too. And again, there's a current lawsuit that we're watching there. So states are doing all kinds of creative things, the best they can do. But I hope that they will put the bedrock of the basic requirements in person by a doctor, no mailing, so that when the FDA does act, and I'm optimistic that they will at some point, I'd hate to see any more women die or a famous woman die or something that brings that to the top of the fold, you know? I feel that clock ticking where, we may have some danger, but, um, states can still do all those things. They're in place when that happens. So when the FDA does what it should do, states will have those policies already in place, and that's what we work with states to do.
One last question. We're kind of toward the end of time, but in the blue states, where obviously you can, they still have the clinics and places. Do you think for those who are listening, and if and they're like they don't really care, they're going to get an abortion no matter what. Is it better, I guess, for them or safer for the mother? Obviously, for the child, it's going to end in death no matter what. So, but is it safer for the mother to go to these abortion clinics, or is it or instead of getting these pills?
I don't wanna see,
Anyone?
anyone
Yeah,
get
of
an
course.
abortion.
Yeah, yeah.
But if she's going to get an abortion, the clinic or a hospital or something with the surgical procedure, the old-fashioned kind, not the drugs. The drugs are not what they appear. They have, a built-in, um, complication rate that's much higher than the surgical kind of abortion.
And I asked the question because again, it's not in any way to again advocate or encourage, but I want to
Right,
do it to make certain that other people who are in states where they don't have it to recognize that's how dangerous it is. They know it's so dangerous that even that you and others say, look, this is so much worse than what was there before, and dangerous for the mother as well. And I don't think people recognize that. What else can people do, just everyday people? There are people like you who are on the front lines, and there are other people out there that are just I mean, they know it's wrong, but they don't know what to do. They're kind of, they might be the grocery store clerk or a restaurant worker, like, what do they do in these situations? Whether or not they may be approaching somebody who is may have an unwanted pregnancy or somebody who is not at all, who may be somebody who's, 60 years old and just has to, and realizes this is something that I need to fight and do something with. What do you recommend for those 2 types of people there?
recommend at least 2 things. One is if you know someone, a woman who's pregnant, um, ask how you can help her. She has car trouble, and she has to build a nursery, and she needs, clothing and whatever, food, especially after she delivers, it'd be great to have, DoorDash or something, so she doesn't have to, you know, uh, do that for the first couple of weeks. Childcare is always, is a terrible problem in the United States right now, very expensive. Or even just volunteer at a pregnancy center, or just go online and click. Most of those centers have wish lists, and you can just it usually translates to Amazon or someplace where you can just click and support, these pregnancy care centers, or if you're involved in a church, your church clothing pantry or food pantry or whatnot. The other thing is, and, most of us don't do this, but it is, n it has become such a political issue, and it's unfortunate because this is such a personal and dangerous issue. It really is a health issue. This is what we've been talking about today. But it's our elected officials that do pass those laws that limit or what our state's going to do. Are we going to have abortion until birth, or are we going to have no abortion or somewhere in between? That is a legislative thing. So your elected officials, and a lot of them don't want to talk about it. They're afraid of the voters, but, just last week, the poll came out, McLaughlin and Associates, and this was a poll of the majority of pro-choice people, but 7 in 10 likely voters think that she should at least go to a doctor and at least get a prescription, oversight, medical testing, whatnot,
Right.
which we all have to do in our lives. But our elected officials get a little squishy about this sometimes. They need support. They need to know that the voters are with me if I'm going to, limit abortion or regulate abortion. So, as scary as that might seem, they need to hear from you, that you support their efforts to limit, abortion, to regulate that in your state.
And that's both state and federal too. I think a lot of people don't understand the power that states have and the state legislators have because we watch too much CNN and Fox News, which is all national, but we
Right.
don't realize that so much of our day-to-day living is with our state legislature, and I think that's also very important for people to understand that.
Well, and that's when the Dobbs decision, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, the decision said that's gonna go back to the states. So your state legislature is now making that decision about your state, whether you're gonna have abortion in the 3rd trimester, whether you're gonna have no abortion at all, whether you're gonna pass laws that say no mailing into our state or you must see a doctor or whatnot. All of those decisions will be your state legislature. And then what we've been talking about today, though, is the FDA regulating or lack thereof of the dangerous pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
Okay, well, Sue, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I appreciate it. I appreciate the work you're doing. I think it's extraordinarily important, and let's and hopefully we can get the FDA to kind of strengthen and tighten a lot of this stuff that's happening as well. So I appreciate everything that you're doing with this.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today.
All right, thank you.